paranormal. It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, boys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted, but we are taking a little bit of a veer off of our normal topic. As you guys remember, in the last 6 months, twice I've had an author named Ron Felber on. He wrote an interesting book, a true story called The Mojave Incident, about a couple who was, abducted by aliens. And in one specific instance during this, there were demonic type aliens, little, short, vicious, mean looking, and they all seemed to cower away when one came from the sky and was more of an angelic being. And he also wrote one called The Unwelcomed, which was about a demonic possession in 1898 Boston. Well, as we talked, and also blending in all the other things we've talked about on this show in the last 3 years, you had to wonder if these are all connected, if there is something else going on here. Can you combine, and many people do, aliens and demonics and all of it, Bigfoot, are they all somehow mixed together? Men in Black, Mothman, cryptids, so many things going on in the world. Are they all connected? Well, then I met this man. His name is William Wallace Wagner Jr., and he is a evangelical Christian, or was. I don't know if he still takes that phrase or not. And way back in the past, well, I say in the past, I think it was 2016, he had a close encounter with a craft he couldn't identify, and it's kind of jarred his thinking about things. And since then, he's written 2 books. One is called Crossing the Crevasse, My Epiphany, How It Affected the Bible and Disclosure. And the other one's called Within Grasp, My Evolving Journey Discovers More Truths Beyond the Bible. So let's get a new point of view on this. Let me introduce you to Wally Wagner. Wally?
Hello.
All right.
Dan.
Wally, I'm glad you came on because we've had some interesting topics here, and sometimes it seems they're all blending together. So I come to ask you your opinion, but you had an experience that kind of jarred your beliefs, if I understand correctly.
You do understand correctly. I was, let's say, an evangelical Christian at the time, teaching Sunday school. This was back in September of 2016. And just so the audience knows, I have been a conservative Methodist and conservative Southern Baptist. That's part of my background.
Okay.
And I was a mailman at the time. It was September, beautiful day, blue sky. I had just made a delivery. I'm in Bedford, Virginia, by the way. That's in between Roanoke and Lynchburg for our listeners and watchers. And something or somebody told me to stop and look up. And this has been a question I've yet to answer. Was it a coincidence, or were they communicating with me? Maybe they knew I was going to write books on this subject. But nonetheless, I stopped out in the front of the lady's house, standing in your yard, and I looked up, and right over my head was what we now call the white Tic Tac,
Okay.
UFO variety. This was about 15 months before they came out as being public by Lou Alexandro and the stars of the Academy. And you've probably seen the clips on TV of these types of crafts. But this craft was over my head. It had no nacelles, no windows, no wings, gleaming white, no windows, It was just there.
Was it
About 3
hovering or
seconds.
was it moving?
It was hovering, still stationary, right beside a little cloud.
Okay.
I saw it for maybe 2.5 to 3 seconds, and then gone. I did not see it leave. It either cloaked, went into another dimension, or took off so fast, I couldn't see it.
Mhm.
And I don't know which one of those three, it may be. And there again, I'm not sure whether it wanted me to see it. Maybe it was a mechanical, malfunction,
Yeah.
or maybe they knew, hey, here's a fellow that might bring a little bit of a new reality to the world. And that's kind of sort of what I'm doing. I'm planting seeds, and we'll see what sprouts. But
All
as
right.
time has gone on, let me just say that I have been on the spiritual path since then, and a lot of things have changed. I'm no longer an evangelical Christian. I am a Christian, but
Okay.
I'm more of an ecumenical type and more of a spiritual type. I don't subscribe to any religion
Okay.
now.
So through this experience, and you and I had talked before the show a little bit about this, and in your books you've talked about the differences in what we call God.
Hmm.
Can you kind of explain to these folks, like you told me, some about what we discussed earlier on that?
Well, I was like everyone else. I pretty much believed what I had been taught
Hmm.
all through the years, and I'm over 68 years old now. And seeing this craft and knowing that I had read Eric von Donigen's book, back in the
Chariots.
early 70s.
Yes.
In fact, it was the first book I read I couldn't put down. And that had been stored in my brain since then. But you realize that things aren't quite the way Sunday school books and commentaries and what you hear from behind the pulpit and
Mhm.
general things pertaining to the Bible. It's different if you go and study it for yourself and try to look at things with a non-biased
Mhm.
eye. I call it, I termed it ostricism, because having taught Sunday school, we used the MacArthur Bible a lot. And every time we had a specific question or wanted to really delve into something deep, you would go to his commentary. And for some reason, that verse just wasn't mentioned.
Uh-huh.
And this has come across so often. And I have come to the conclusion, having done, quite a bit of study for my books on early church history, Bible
Yeah.
history, Christianity in general, that this all goes back to when the Bible was put together and what was considered worthy to be included. And it's really become an agenda, a church agenda since then, to gain power and to be manipulative and be successful. They wanted Christianity to take off
Mhm.
and to be successful, although they still haven't tackled that in the East, and let alone Saudi Arabia, which is so close to where all this happened. But I digress that. But all this happened, and for me, it's a pre-planned itinerary that has now been taught and carried on through the seminaries and theological schools, and now that the rabbis and preachers and whatnot, it's all the same thing you pretty much hear. So what I'm bringing to the table are these things you don't hear, and how to connect the dots and to see that they've been here all along, and to realize that this God in the Old Testament is completely different than the God in the New Testament. Surprise.
And as we talked about before, and as I said then, and again, probably have to smoke a turd in hell for this one, but honestly, the God in the Old Testament to me, and I was raised Southern Baptist, was vindictive, vicious, killed children. He killed, he made fathers kill their own kids, or
Well,
almost did.
I have read some accounts, Dan, where he was responsible, if you include the flood,
Good
for
point.
over 1 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all these. I hate to use the word tribes because I'm not sure that's a correct term. They were living on their own lands. I mean, when the Israelites were proceeding to the promised land, the land that perhaps was the portion that Yahweh received from his father El, which is in Deuteronomy
Mm-hmm.
32, they were just in the way. And these people were murdered and killed in situ on their own properties. I mean, Israel was the invader. Israelites were the invader en route to their own land. I mean, the Kenites were the only ones that really helped them.
Uh-huh.
But many places in the Bible, they are to kill everybody, children, animals, women, everybody, make them just completely disappear. So where is this God of mercy and forgiveness and understanding and patience and love? It's not displayed in the God of the Old Testament.
Okay.
No way at all. And so many places the children have been killed. I just don't understand that. You compare that with the New Testament and Jesus's words, spare not, bring the little children to me. And another place, it's better to put a millstone around your neck and be dropped to the bottom of the ocean to harm one of these little ones. And that's just one of the myriad of ways that there's just so many, differences. And I would dare say that it's in the nature of God, not just the physical aspects. I mean, the God in the Old Testament walked. Hundreds of people saw him.
Mm-hmm.
And the God of the New Testament, nobody has seen, ever. No one ever sees God. So how do you compare the two? It's like we have two separate, complete traditions or individual books bound together into one book, trying to make it one God.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really one God until about the 8th century before Common Era, according to Dr. Lumpkin and Dr. Katz. And there were multiple gods in Canaan.
Yeah.
Multiple. And over time, as most religions do, they meshed together. And they wanted the one male God scenario, when in fact Elohim referred to both males and females. In fact, the God of the Old Testament's father, El, E-L, is the same person that Jacob made altars to. He did not make altars to Yahweh. He made them to El twice.
Okay.
And this El is actually the one who split up the land and gave out their portions or inheritance. And this God of the Old Testament received his portion. And this God of the Old Testament is the only God that I have studied from all the other traditions all around the world, from all other times, that has the word jealousy applied to him as an adjective. And why would he be jealous if he is God of everything, everything, God of the universe, creator God? Who is he jealous of, or why is he jealous?
It's a good point. And as we talked also, the things he did to Job, it was atrocious. And don't worry about the family I killed earlier. I'll get you a new one.
And how's Job repaid? With material things, cattle. I mean, and 10 other children. Well, what happened to his firstborn? If you're Hebrew, firstborn means everything.
Right.
I mean, that's how your lineage is carried on. They were mercifully killed. It was terrible.
Now, was that in the Old Testament as, I guess, as the Jewish race did it, read it, wrote it, however, or is that something that was changed during Vatican I?
Well, that's a good question. I honestly believe that it goes back to the Hebrews.
Okay.
Job is actually the oldest book in the Bible. It predates Genesis. So you might want to keep that in mind. I've heard some people say that's even why Satan did what he did in the garden, was because of what happened in Job and him losing, his bet, or bets. I guess that's plural.
Okay.
But Did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think there is a solid answer. You gave a good opinion, but you lost me on Job occurred before Genesis.
Yeah, Job is the oldest book in the Bible.
I was not aware of that at all.
So you might consider that to be at a time before Satan was even deemed to be evil.
Hmm.
I mean, Satan and Yahweh seem to be on equal terms in Job. I mean,
Yeah.
why? And then it says that in Job that this Satan enticed him, or enticed him to create harm to Job. How does God become enticed?
Brings up good questions.
And what we had talked about earlier too, and I'm just saying, for me now, and this is my personal revelation from this path I have been on.
Hmm.
This God in the Old Testament flies. So in order to fly, that means you're not already at point B. You may be at point A, but you're not at point B because you need to fly to get there. This God in the Old Testament goes down 19 times.
Hmm.
And I ask the question to everybody, how do you go down if you're already supposed to be there?
Can you give an example of him flying and going down to earth?
Well, there's two examples that flat out say that he flies. One
Okay.
is in Psalms 18:10, I believe, where he flies on the wings of a cherub. A cherub is sometimes used to reference a craft. And another place is in 2 Samuel by King David, 22:11. Both of those instances say that God flies.
Hmm.
And there's other inferences without the word fly. There's many inferences
Okay.
that God flies and is in a craft. I can go into those if you would like.
By the time Christ comes along, he can, well, like when Christ was baptized, the beam of light came out of the sky, and this is my son, and such was said. So from Christ on, or at least from the New Testament on, God was quite different from the way he was portrayed in the early books.
Definitely.
Okay.
The God in the Old Testament for me, Dan, now was an explorer or visitor. And this is played out in a book not in the Bible, but it's indirectly referenced to, called The Assumption of Moses, what
Okay.
actually uses the word visitation. They were here on a visitation and they will come back on a visitation a second time. But if you go to some of the old Jewish writings like the Zohar and whatnot,
Hmm.
you'll find that this Old Testament God actually has 18,000 worlds to look after. So he flies from one to the other. So that's something to keep in mind. He was here for a period of time and then left.
So why the big change in between the New and the Old and the New Testament?
I'm not sure I can answer why. I just
Okay.
know that there is a significant, beyond significant change in the nature of God for me in the Old Testament
There is.
versus the New Testament. I mean, in the New Testament, verbatim, no one sees God. No one has ever seen God. In the Old Testament, hundreds of people saw God.
Hmm.
Moses saw God. Abraham saw God. Zipporah saw God. Uh, uh, Aaron saw God.
Hmm.
The 70 elders that went up on the mountain and supped with him saw God up on top of the mountain, almost like it was a banquet. The two sons of Aaron saw God. And then if you go to Psalm 82, you have this Old Testament God standing in an assembly talking to all these other gods. So,
And where was that at again? Which?
Psalm 82.
Okay.
If you focus on Psalm 82 and Deuteronomy 32,
Hmm.
it really, for me, has changed a lot of my focus and belief structure for the Old Testament.
Wasn't there one of Adam's sons who walked with God, walked away, basically disappeared?
Well, yes. It depends on where you look in the Bible.
Okay.
You're referring to Enoch.
Yes, yes.
The one Enoch that you always hear from behind the pulpit. You never hear about the other Enoch
Okay.
because it doesn't fit.
Oh, I want to hear this one. What's the
Cain's,
difference?
Cain's son was Enoch,
Okay.
who also built cities. And if you read your Bible carefully, you will realize that the lineages are substantially different to go from Adam to Noah versus the Adam to Noah lineage with Cain. Some of the names are slightly the same or slightly different. They may be Akkadian for that matter, but there's significant differences.
Okay.
Which I'm assuming that you probably know this, Dan, but this is for our audience.
Sure.
Multiple people wrote Genesis. Genesis was not written by Moses, and most of the Jewish scholars today would totally agree with me. There were multiple people who wrote Genesis and compiled it.
Okay.
And that's why there's differences in lineages, differences in the number of animals that went on the ark, and some other significant differences. It's a collection of what was considered to be truthful writings. So there's the Enoch that was the seventh removed from Adam. He walked with God and was not. That's the same Enoch that wrote the books, and I included the book of Enoch in Crossing the Crevasse. And no, I didn't. It was in Within Graphs. Sorry about that.
Okay.
This book, and the other Enoch built cities. And that's really all we know. That story is kind of cut short.
Okay.
So that there's a lot of stories that are cut short, but in the Old Testament, but that's all we know.
Okay. Enoch may have walked away with God, or the gods, or angels, or something.
Really, he didn't walk away. You know
Okay.
that he was picked up, much like Elijah.
Okay, remind me of Elijah. I'm not placing that story right now.
Well, Elijah's mentioned a lot in 2 Kings, the prophet. He was picked up in a whirlwind, and he was no longer.
Okay.
And then in the New Testament, you will realize that Elijah appears again as John the Baptist. And then, of course, John the Baptist is decapitated. And later at the Transfiguration, there is Elijah again. And if you believe Malachi and Revelation, he may be one of the two prophets later on in the book of Revelation. So this Elijah seems to go all through the Bible. He basically lived in a cave on Mount Sinai, close to where, apparently one of the homes of this Old Testament God was.
Okay.
It was either Seir or Sinai or the land of Midian, but he was generally known to be from that area. And this Elijah had significant powers, and God of the Old Testament allowed him to use these powers. And in one case, unfortunately, it even, caused the death of 42 youths or children when they called him bald. So he used the powers, both good and bad. But anyway, that's pretty much Elijah. He was picked up in a craft, taken away. There were people on the planet at the time in prophecy schools that knew this was going to happen. There were prophecy schools back then, and teaching the Hebrews things of the unseen world and how to use your mind to realize what's going to happen in the future. So they actually knew that he was going to be picked up in that specific place and time. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Okay, Wally, I'm going to have to go for a commercial break. If you'll hold on just a minute, I want to get more into your theories, because they're incredible, and you're telling me things I was not even aware of.
Super. Well, thank you.
I'll be right back. Hang on. A lot of stuff here we're going to have to really work on. I think of Ezekiel's wheel. I think of the light in the sky, the Israelis, whatever, the Jews followed across the desert. Goes back to other things in the India versions of the past. There's a lot to uncover here, and I'm really enjoying talking to Wally, and you're really going to enjoy watching this one. So if you'll hold on just a second, my friends, we're going to talk about a couple other things.
This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us number one on Paranormal Talk Radio.
Friends, I want to let you know there is so much going on the Onyx Network that it seems like every couple of weeks we have to change that because we get some new shows. And like the ad said, if you want it, we've got it. We've got ghost stories coming out of Hollywood. We've got cryptids coming out of Australia, UFOs, ghosts, demonology, astrology, name it. It's here. Why aren't you? And we're going to talk more about that, but I want to get back to Wally now because I'm really enjoying this conversation. All right, Wally. So how did the sighting you saw in the sky start this journey for you?
Well, I came across an individual that is now perhaps my mentor, and his name is Reverend Michael Carter. He is in North Carolina. He's an active pastor. He's on Ancient Aliens quite a bit. He's written a bunch of books, and he's one of the most humble, intelligent, wise people I have come across. We had a face-to-face, and he convinced me that I am on a path, a spiritual path. And I have taken that hook, line, and sinker, rod and reel, and proceeded on this path.
Okay.
And told him I would go wherever I was led with both eyes open. And that's exactly what has happened. I've met and talked to a bunch of interesting people along the way. If you look behind me, I've read a bunch of books to where they're just all mumbled and jumbled now. I guess that comes with age too. I'm beyond the point. I've forgotten more than I can remember by far. So,
we discussed earlier, and it was an interesting topic I'd never heard before, of the Father of Jehovah, the Father of God.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of repeat that, what you told me earlier about
Sure.
that information?
It goes back to Deuteronomy 32, 8 and 9, I believe, and I'm using my memory on that. where you will see the word portion, where the Most High God, and why wouldn't you want your God to be Most High? I'm just throwing that out, issues an inheritance to his children. And Yahweh received his portion. So here is the God of, I mean, if you're a Christian,
Everything.
the God of everything, the universe,
Created the earth,
everything, who received a portion. So who issued this portion? Well, the Ugaritic texts were found in 28 and made public in 1929, coming from Syria, and it ties everything together.
Mm-hmm.
The God of the Canaanites, the chief god, was El, E-L. And that's who the Most High God was, called El-Elyon, E-L-Y-O-N. And he was the one that issued out the inheritance. And this inheritance was apparently land, or the nations, that totaled a number of 70. He had 70 sons.
Okay.
And if you connect the 3 sons of Noah, there were 70 nations back then that were issued, and they each had their boundaries. We didn't talk about boundaries, but you read Joshua and you realize Joshua 24, for example, that there are specific boundaries, and each God had their area. And if you crossed one boundary and went to another boundary, you had to leave that God behind and accept a new God. Abraham, for example, Abraham's father perhaps venerated a separate God. But this El is the same El that used to be in the original Hebrew Bible, and it got removed because it was sometimes, interconnected with Elohim. Elohim, plural, with the I-M on the end, was mentioned some 2,500 times in the original Hebrew text. But because it was plural, and because it normally, not always, but normally referred to just a male, but it also could include females, such as Asherah. Asherah was most likely El's wife. So together they had the 70 children. Asherah was removed from the Bible when it was originally written. It was mistranslated as the word groves, as in an Asherah tree.
Okay.
But because of the Ugaritic text, Asherah has been rejuvenated. Asherah is not in the King James Bible. Jehovah is mentioned 7 times in the King James Bible. You go to the NIV, for example, Jehovah is not mentioned at all. In fact, Jehovah is not mentioned in any of the modern translations. But guess what? Asherah is now mentioned 70 times, 40 times in 40 times in the NIV. And she was the queen of heaven. She was the consort and wife of El. And now we know this is fact because of all the figurines and items that have been found around the temple area. In fact, she was venerated at the temple. But we had to have this one male god, so that didn't work in the agenda. And as time went by, all these gods, we're talking Mot, we're talking Kenet, we're talking Baal, all these gods slowly morphed, including El, into one god. And this was about the 8th century BC or before Common Era. And you had this consolidation into this one God, which they called Yahweh. In fact, for me, it's okay to say the word Yahweh because actually Yahweh gave his name in the Old Testament, where in the New Testament, no one knows the name of God because it's so hallowed, such as in the Lord's Prayer. But it's not hallowed in the Old Testament because he gives his name once as being jealous, and the other time as Yahweh. My name is Yahweh. So this became the God of Israel. And I'm writing a book now called The Nucleus, in which I have, and if you can see this, my hands, it's about 4 pages long, where I've gone through the Bible just to point out that this God, Yahweh, was only the God of Israel. What has happened over time, especially when the canonists put the Bible together, we started going from beyond the Levant, westward, mostly more west than east. But this God became not only God of Israel, but God of the universe. And that's where we stand today, that this God of the Old Testament is not only the same God as in the New Testament, but is God of the universe, the creator of everything, everything, omnificent, omnipotent, immutable, just on and on with all the adjectives. He knows every hair on your head. He knows what you're going to do before you do it.
He knew you before you were born. So.
Yeah. Well, that may be true. I don't know, but definitely, I was alive before I was born, and I believe that you were too. One of the stations on this path that I've been on, without a doubt, is that reincarnation is definitely true.
Wally, we talked earlier. You were identified as a Christian, which I identify as a follower of Christ, because Christians just have a bad reputation right now, and have had for many years, I think. But I do believe in Christ, and I believe Christ was a Son of God. But why the change between his Father and the God of the Old Testament? Are they the same? Or are we dealing with a whole new God?
For 60 some years, I thought they were the same.
Yeah.
Until, I've learned to an extent, and I want to be careful with my wording here, Dan, to go inside, which is something you're not taught in the typical Christian realm. It's more Eastern flavored, but you call it meditation, if you will. Learning to know your soul and your spirit, your place in the universe, etc. I know that reincarnation exists, and I know for me, God is truly everywhere, in everything, does not go from point A to point B, does not need to go down, does not walk. God is totally spirit, just like the New Testament says, spirit, love, and light. And I have a hard time now connecting that with the God of the Old Testament. So I think that pretty much answers your question there. And as far as me being a Christian, I say that, but I really look at Christ as a teacher. He's a mentor and a teacher to me. I really don't subscribe so much to the being saved and the being born again attributes that are normally applied to a Christian. They mean differently for me now than they did, even as late as 5 years ago. And here I am, I've been baptized in the Jordan and ordained and have had just almost every position in the church. I haven't, of course, I'm not a pastor, but I've done about, 17 or so sermons and one funeral. But that's, I don't think I'm called to be a pastor. I would probably turn people off. I would have to ease them into these subjects. I mean, I've had other Methodist preachers tell me, you really don't believe everything that's in the Bible, do you? And they made the mistake of mentioning that once from behind the pulpit. And of course, they weren't there the following year. But you have to be careful on how you approach people with some of this information, because you can turn them off instantly. Yeah, I just have to qualify it and say, this is what I have found out. This is what resonates with me. And this is where I found it, using the Bible as a foundation. And that's really what I'm trying to do. A lot of this stuff is in the Bible if you know where to look and can connect the dots.
Well, let's go around and take this back to the beginning. What was in that craft above you? Angels, God, another race? What do you think?
My theory on that, and this is a theory,
of course,
it's either another race or it's black budget.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in secret government.
Mhm.
For example, people think our president knows everything. Well, he only has a mid-level secret clearance. There's about 20 levels above him. I mean, there's some 3 and 4 star generals that don't have clearance to everything because it's unacknowledged
Right.
special access projects. So, and you can't even do an accounting of the Pentagon. So, I mean, we tried that and failed. There's money that goes everywhere. I mean, just look what happened recently. You know, with Lou Alexandra, with with his 22 million that
Mm.
got allotted to his group. But all I will say is that I can accept it either way. It's either a race or a portion of us
Okay.
that even the regular Navy knows nothing about. And I am almost, if I had to pick between the two, I would go 60% that what I saw was ours. And that
Okay.
is a change from 8 years ago.
Hmm.
I would have said totally an extraterrestrial race, because I fully believe that we've had 80 some races here and have already interacted with them since the days of Truman and Eisenhower. So plus I totally believe what Ben Rich has said. He used to be the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works.
Right.
This was back in the 90s. And I quote, "We've already been to the stars. There was a mistake in the equation, and we have that fixed." And you look at people like Bob Lazar, who I do believe, you know, we're anywhere from 50 to 400 years ahead of what the general public knows. That's
Agreed.
where we're at with our secret government. And do I believe that we're already out there? The answer is wholeheartedly yes.
Okay.
Do I believe the Space Force that Trump created is, something that just happened? No, it's just to put another layer of the onion to keep from knowing what's really out there.
Okay.
I honestly believe what is out there is so life-changing and so detrimental to our capitalist society that the few people that actually are at the center of the onion may be doing us a favor by not letting all the beans out of the bag. We're getting little drips, but
okay.
I'm not sure that we can handle the whole truth and keep our society together. And that's a personal opinion.
There's free energy. There's
without a doubt, there's free energy. I mean, without a doubt, we've had free energy for 70 years. Look what happened to William Colby. I mean, he was going to present, the former CIA chief back in the 70s. He was going to present free energy, but he just was mysteriously found upside down in the Potomac. So with his coffee pot still on and his house unlocked and his computer on, little things like that happen.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, look at Forrestal. He got pushed out of the window in Baltimore. I mean, people, look at Phil Snyder.
Remind me of Phil Snyder.
Well, he was a contractor for the government, and he was drilling, and he apparently drilled into an underground base, maybe in Dulce, New Mexico.
Okay.
And a gunfight.
Was he the one that had part of his hand shot off?
Yep.
Okay.
And he exposed his chest where he was actually shot at. This being used a beam and forced him back, and that's where he got, I guess you would say, injured. But he came forth, and he was found mysteriously killed in his apartment with, well, let's just say he was strangled.
There's a strange number of suicides in the UFO field in the last 10 years or so. We've been talking about that for quite a while also.
You want to be careful on what you say if you've gotten a little bit of truth. You want to be careful.
Wally, what kind of advice would you give to folks, or what kind of message would you send to these people about what your books?
Well, my message would be, I want you to realize that what we have been taught since the days of Christ
Hmm.
is only partial truths. Do homework for yourself. Don't believe anything I say. Do your own homework. Just let me plant some seeds and then you do your own study. Do not go around blind. Realize that you're in a pond, and I use this analogy in Within Grasp. I have jumped to another lily pad and it's okay. There are other lily pads in the pond, same pond, but
Hmm.
some people are stuck on the lily pad that they've been stuck on forever. And I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, I came from that lily pad you're on, but I'm here to tell you that there's other lily pads in the pond. And once the mind has been expanded, it never goes back to its original form or shape. And that's an Oliver Wendell Holmes quote. And I'm never going back to believe what I believed before seeing the craft. Everything is new for me now. It's been exciting. Sometimes I've gotten answers before I've even had questions to attach them to. And it's come in spurts. And just realizing the word glory, the word spirit, the word stars, how they're used in the Bible, knowing that there were just a few thousand Hebrew words compared to our, well, some people say 150,000, other people say up to 200,000 English words, that many of these words, that's why they have a hard time with translation, have multiple meanings.
Yes.
I mean, spirit, for example, could mean a ghost, but it could also mean a wind. It could mean a cherub. And I say that it means a UFO or a craft. And this is portrayed in Zechariah chapter 6, where these spirits are called crafts or chariots of fire or chariots.
Right.
Chariots, cherubs are the same things as crafts.
I
And,
did
and,
not.
and these gods, you have to look around the world. I mean, the Ramana in India, so
Mhm.
many of these gods flew. So if a god flies and they're in a craft, are they really a god, or we were presented with information and technology that was so far beyond your imagination that we made them gods? I
And that
mean,
would explain Egypt, the things
sure,
found there, the
sure,
Aztec temples, the fact there's pyramids all around the world.
bingo. But I mean, even Solomon could fly if you believe what's in the Ethiopian Hebrew the Guest. He could fly, and Mercury, Vishnu, Hermes, Osiris, Enki, Ra, Gabriel flew
Uh huh.
in Daniel chapter 9. So we know angels fly in these crafts too. So these heavenly beings, let's put it that way. When you say heaven, that refers just to anything up in the sky.
Okay.
They flew, and they flew in crafts, and these crafts have been with us since before Christ.
Mhm.
And I'm going to veer off here just for a second and show
All
you
right.
this little book right here. You want to know about crafts before Roswell? They're all listed in this book by
And
Ken Goodsward and Barbara DeLong. It's a
okay,
wealth of information.
we'll have to
Uh,
check that out. That's
crafts have
awesome.
been in existence not before Christ, during Christ, and after Christ, and today. So we've never been alone. Ancient Aliens has that right on the opening of the show. We have never been alone. And
Okay.
if you incorporate that in your thinking, and knowing that these gods came here in a craft and were given God status, it changes your belief structure. And I
Hmm.
honestly believe the God of the New Testament incorporates this new belief structure because the God cannot be seen in the New Testament. God is spirit only.
Hmm.
God's name is hallowed. God is love, and God is light. And that's the description of God. And you realize that God is in everything. And not only that, I realize now, and this is going to shock some people, that I am a God too. It says that in Genesis, and it
Hmm.
also says that if in John 14 that anyone who believes in me shall do not only the miracles I have done or the works I have done, but will do greater than these. So people who have believed, in Jesus have done miracles. Some of the saints have done remarkable miracles, since the time of Christ, and much more than what Christ was purported to do, and so that leaves us to where we're at today. Where are all these miracles being performed today? And I would dare say that we've lost our teachers. Look at Paul. Paul was a slayer of Christians, and he turned completely around. He went to Saudi Arabia for 3 years before he became an apostle. He was taught for 3 years in Saudi Arabia. Then he went on his missionary journeys. Then he had the power to blind Elymas and to bring, was it Eutychus back to life? He didn't have these powers before. But 3 years of training, pretty much the same amount of time the disciples were with Christ. Peter could raise someone, Dorcas, from the dead, for example. And Peter could walk. He took that first step out of the boat and walked on water before he panicked. So we have these powers, if you want to call it that. And that's another thing I'm looking at now, the word faith. Faith to me now means power. And if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. Well, I don't see anybody moving anything, let alone a mountain or calming storms or anything, but we have it within us. The seeds have been planted. They just need some fertilizer, put on them. And we need teachers, and we don't have that anymore. The old agenda tells us all about these things, but not how to do these things. It gives us the beginning and the end, but how you get there is up to you.
Wally, we could talk like this for hours, but I have got to go.
I've totally enjoyed it, Dan.
Well, I hope you come back sometime and talk some more, because I love your opinions and I love the angle you're coming at.
I would love to come back. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, hang loose for a little bit and we'll talk some more after the show.
Okay.
All right, folks. Once again, this is Wallace Wagner, and he is the author of Within Grasp and, there it is, Crossing the Crevasse, My Epiphany and How It Affected the Bible and Disclosure. And where can we get those books at? Wally?
Amazon. They're both on Amazon. They're both in their second edition as well.
All right. Wally, thanks for coming on, man. You've been great. I'll
talk
to you in a few minutes.
Thank you, Dan.
So much stuff to consider. I will leave it right where it's at for you to think about. But as Wally said, just try and break away from what you've been taught through your childhood. I've dealt with so many people who really believed any spirit out there that we dealt with was demonic, because according to them, the Bible was you go to heaven, you go to hell, and everything here is demonic. And I just can't go along with that from what I have seen. So come into it with an open mind. And friends, like I said, there is a lot going on in the Unex Network. I want you guys to become a member. unexnetwork.com. Drop down a little bit. It's free. And when you become a member, you also get access to the blogs, access to a monthly newsletter where we kind of talk about all the things going on. I got to tell you, the blog's been crazy with the UFO sightings, the Tic Tacs, as Wally discussed, cube-shaped UFOs like the Borg. A lot of stuff going on. The Navy, and suddenly the Pentagon saying all those pilots were wrong. I don't get that at all. But a lot of stuff going on, and it's reported right there on the blog pretty much as it happens. You also get a monthly magazine, and if you're a member, it's free, emailed to you once a month. Some of the best writers in the paranormal field. Goes through everything, guys. It goes through ghosts. Here's one I wrote on the battleship North Carolina. It goes through a lot of different things. I recently wrote one about vampires in America, 2 articles in 2 different magazines. And giants. Again, time travel, UFOs, cryptids, demons. It's all covered on there. Astrology is in there all the time. So there's so much going on Unex Network, and it's free. Just jump right on and check it out. And we've got the XCon every year. Last year and this year, it's being held in Springfield, Missouri. And last year, some really interesting things happened in that as we were sitting there listening to the speakers, suddenly these shadows came right across the room on the stage. They come back between me and the stage. Hundreds of us saw it multiple times. People were seeing it all over, and then we found out the hotel was haunted. Nobody had told us. So we may be doing a little bit of ghost hunting at that hotel this time. You may want to be there to check it out. And as far as myself, I will be speaking there, and I will be speaking at the Appalachian Paranormal Arts and Culture Collective in Beckley, West Virginia, coming on May 11th, 2024. So if you get the chance, check that out. Again, you can just type in Appalachian Paranormal Arts and Culture Collective, May 11th, and you'll see there's a lot of neat stuff going on. There's a lot of Paracons going on. Check them out. And I'm going to go ahead and back out of here because I need to talk to Wally some more. I'm just intrigued by this. But I want you guys most of all, and mean this sincerely, stay spooked. Good night.